from the 30 NATO member countries signed the protocols to expand the alliance to 32 nations. The neophytes of the group will be Finland and Sweden. Those nations were spurred to apply for membership by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For its part, Finland shares a border with Russia some 800 miles long. I talked this week with Finland's Foreign Minister, Pekka Haavisto, about Russia, NATO, and the war in Ukraine. Mr. Foreign Minister, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
First, let me ask you, is your application for NATO membership now accepted? The Turks did sign a memorandum. Do you think it's on its way?
Well, we signed during the Madrid NATO summit a memorandum of understanding with Turkey, with Sweden, tripartite memorandum. So I think now we are just fulfilling everything that has been agreed on that, and it should go on. And of course, we are in a situation that very rapidly many NATO countries ratified Finnish and Swedish membership applications. So we are very pleased of that.
Meanwhile, what is happening with Russia? Putin reacted very negatively. Your president had called him and told him. What has Russia's ongoing reaction been? Has there been one?
Russia's reaction mainly has been concentrating that if new weaponry will come to Finland, if in our defense planning something that they feel threatening might appear, then they react and so forth. But our reading is that they concentrate now very much on Ukraine, and our border, 800 miles between Finland and Russia, is working normally. So there are no any additional tensions between Finland and Russia.
What is your sense of what is going on in Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Are they gaining ground? Are they losing too many men? What's your reading?
Well, of course, many people say that Russia has a huge resilience. They can produce material, they can send men in this kind of conflict. They don't easily step back and so forth. So this is, of course, you can expect that this conflict can be a long one. And we should prepare for a long conflict. At the same time, of course, the Western powers, US, European Union, has been strengthening Ukraine quite a lot and sending military material and supporting economically and so forth.
Do you think that the European Union will be able to hold firm on the economic sanctions against Russia?
I think the European Union economic sanction packages have been working well so far. But of course, then we come to the more sensitive areas. Oil, decision on oil was already so that we had to make some exceptions with Hungary and so forth. And of course, with the gas, it's quite difficult to make a unified sanction decision. But of course, it's also true that when the sanctions established, they come to full force step by step, in the sense that they are affecting the Russian economy, not only at once, but step by step. And I think in that sense, they are very effective.
And you think Europeans will stay? I mean, it's going to be a cold winter. Gas prices are going to be very high. Do you worry that countries like Italy and even Germany will find it very hard to maintain unity?
There are countries who are still too dependent on Russian energy, Russian gas particularly. And at the same time, of course, we try to make decisions on green transition in Europe. We are, for example, in Finland making the LNG decisions, not using the Russian gas, but using the LNG tankers and using the pipeline for LNG. We are also increasing now our nuclear capacity and so forth. I think Europe is in the front of very important new energy decisions.
There are people who say what's going to happen is it's a long war, as you say. Russia has been able to maintain and even expand its control. And Putin is waiting. He's waiting for the gas prices to get higher, for the pain to be felt more deeply. And then at some point he will offer to negotiate. And that the Europeans will then put pressure on President Zelensky and say, you got to take this deal because we can't, we need this whole thing to end.
There was actually in the beginning of the Russian war against Ukraine this kind of momentum before Bucha and before all these human rights violations, that countries like Turkey offered some mediation and tabled some proposals. But I think the mood also in Ukraine changed towards very bitter after the vast human rights violations by the Russian military. And of course, it's clear that at some moment war will end, but I think it's also very clear that we have to maintain our support to Ukraine as long as needed. And it's up to Ukraine then to decide what is the right moment for negotiations.
How do you imagine relations with Russia will be going forward in the longer term? Because you have an 800-mile border with this country. It's difficult to see a Russia under Putin being easily re-accepted into the European, international fold, sanctions being completely lifted, because they're not going to get out of Crimea. They're not going to get out of certainly some parts of the Donbass. Is Russia now kind of isolated for decades?
From the Finnish perspective, we think always Russia with 100 years perspective. When we look 100 years backwards, it's a Tsar time, it's a Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Gorbachev, Yeltsin, and then Putin. And we see that it has been going back and forth, isolation or towards the Western model and so forth. And when we think 100 years in front of us, it might be the same. There are these kind of moments when Russia is isolated, and there will be moments when Russia is more democratic and more open towards the Western society. And of course, our task is to support those movements and forces also inside Russia who are looking more cooperation with Europe. And there are many young people, younger generation, and intellectual people in the country who suffer of this current situation.
But right now they seem very much in the minority.
Right now they are probably minority, but of course the influence of the war, also Russian soldiers are losing lives and get injured and so forth. These effects of the war are coming step by step, of course, to the consciousness of Russian population as well.
Mr. Foreign Minister, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Next on GPS, there is a staggering $1.7 trillion of student loan debt outstanding in America. There's lots of talk about what President Biden should and shouldn't do about it. Should he forgive all of it, some of it, none of it? I will give you my thoughts in a moment.